Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick Podcast. And today we are going to talk about the Week 6 matchups as well as starts and sits for the upcoming week. Give you the inside information, who are the good matchups, who are the bad matchups, so you can make some good decisions for your fantasy team. So here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick Podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick Podcast, coming at you from Santa Fe, New Mexico. Just got back from my trip, and now it's time to talk about this weekend's matchups. Now, I just wanted to let you all know there is no Thursday night game this week because of all the craziness that's been happening with the schedules right now, and the bye weeks this week include teams, the Raiders, the Seahawks, the Saints, and the Chargers. So there's a lot of fantasy assets that are on bye this week. So your ability to sit some of these players that I'm going to tell you about could be extremely limited, but there are some good options here, and there are some good matchups, and I definitely want to talk about that. So just to let you know, Swami was not able to join me this week. We usually record our start-sit thing on Wednesday morning, but I was in transit. I was driving all day today. So anyway, I'm just doing it by myself this week. Swami will be back next week, and we will enjoy having him back as well. So let's start off with a game that didn't happen last week, but it is going to happen this week, and that's the Broncos at the Patriots. So the dynamic of this game has changed because if the game had happened last week, Cam Newton would not have been played because he was still on the COVID IR, but now he's off. He's been removed from that list. He is going to play, so that does change the dynamics of this game, certainly tilts it heavily in the Patriots' favor. It's already a home game anyway. Cam Newton, absolutely a start this week, as well as the Patriots receivers. Edelman and Harry should have very good matchups this week, should be very effective. Now, the one part of the Patriots offense that I would steer away from if you can is the New England backfield, with the exception of James White. James White is still a start. So, obviously because of his receiving skills. And if you're in a PPR league, he's very valuable. I got to say, James White has been a very tough play this year. I only have him in one of my leagues, but I got him in a league where I did a 0 RB strategy, and he was my RB1, and he's missed like 3 weeks so far. With the tragedy of his family, and then the skipping of this week, their bye week being moved. So anyway, White is good. He's good to start, but I would not start anyone else. I wouldn't start Burkhead. I wouldn't start Damian Harris. Denver is top 5 against the run, so you just need to be aware of that. Then on the other side of the game, really, Melvin Gordon is a sit. Noah Fant is a sit. New England ranks top 7 against both those positions. And but I do like Jerry Jeudy, and I like KJ Hamler this week. I don't think Tim Patrick is going to get enough volume to be fantasy relevant, but I do like those two guys. That's where New England is most vulnerable offensively. They should get some good production there. I do like him for Week 6. So let's move on to the next game, and we've got the Texans, a team that fired their coach, versus the Titans, a team that came off of a dominating performance last week. Man, who was shocked at how badly the Titans beat the Bills last week? That was one of my most shocking upsets of last week. But can the Titans can perform at this level with a short week? Because they did play on. Did they play Tuesday? I can't even remember. Again, I was on vacation. But anyway, they do have a short week this week, so it's a short time to prepare. Whereas for the Texans, they had 20 days to prepare for that game because of the delay in getting that game done. So anyway, there are no sits for Houston and Tennessee right now. This is a great game for matchups. There's good matchups across the board. The only one that I really don't like is Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill did have a huge Week 5. He did great in Week 5, but the Houston defense is top 10 against the quarterback position. So I would expect some regression there from him as opposed to last week. So really, he is the only guy on either of these teams that I would sit. I think, and all the Houston players, man, Deshaun Watson, David Johnson, Will Fuller, even Brandon Cooks, who I mentioned in my last podcast as being a target for the waiver wire. I think he's a start this week. I think you've got good matchups across the board. So I like all the Texans and the Titans except for Tannehill. Now let's hear the next matchup. Now this is actually going to be an interesting game. I'm interested to see what happens in this game because it's the Browns versus the Steelers. We've got the 4-0 Steelers versus the 4-1 Browns. I mean, it's great. This looks like a great matchup. And I got to say the place where I'm most concerned on both sides of the ball for these teams is the run game. Let's see here. Steelers are top 10 against the run, as is the Cleveland defense. So that means Kareem Hunt and James Conner are both sits if you can sit them. Again, it might not be an option that you have this week. You probably have to start them because of all the teams that are on bye. But I do have concern about that they're going to have an effective game against these offenses. But that's something to put out there. I also don't like Austin Hooper. Again, Steelers are top 10 against that position. But where both these teams are vulnerable is through the air. So I love OBJ and I love Landry on Cleveland's side. I love Big Ben. I love all the Pittsburgh receivers, including Ebron. Great matchups all around. This is going to be a good fantasy game, I feel, for the receivers on these teams. Now, next up, what do we got? We got the Ravens at the Eagles. Man, what's up with the Ravens? They're not like they were last year, right? And this is something to be expected. I had Lamar Jackson tagged as a regression candidate. He certainly has fit the regression mold. He's not doing what he did last year. And the whole backfield of Baltimore is just such a mess. They said like this past week, Mark Ingram got 11 carries in week 5. And that's the most carries by any running back on Baltimore this year. It's just like this dearth of volume. There's no volume there. You can't trust any of them. I'm calling Lamar Jackson a sit this week. It's a tough matchup anyway. Eagles D is pretty solid against quarterbacks. And the Baltimore backfield, just because you can't trust the volume, you can't start any of those guys. They all have to be on the bench. And so that's my opinion there. Now, Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown look like great starts. So those are definitely guys to start. I would not hesitate starting them this week. But let's see here. Baltimore's defense is very solid against the run. Miles Sanders is risky, although Miles Sanders did have a tough matchup last week, and he did great. He had a great game. But Miles Sanders is looking like a sit to me just because of this Baltimore defense and how strong it is. One other person that I think is a sit, even though it's a great matchup, is Zach Ertz. I don't know what the heck's going on. With the fact that Dallas Goedert is on injured reserve and not playing right now, how is Zach Ertz not dominating the receiving yards on this team? He's barely getting, he's getting like 5 or 6 targets a week right now. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know why that's happening. Obviously there's been some displeasure with what's going on with the contract negotiations for his extension. He is 30 years old this year. This seems like a situation where they are moving away from Zach Ertz, and that makes him a real risky start going forward. And I would bench him if you can. There's better options available out there for tight ends. So that's where I'm at with that game. Now, next up, we've got, this one's terrible. The 2 worst teams in the worst division in the NFL, Washington at the Giants. My God, and it's just they're just so awful. I'm I don't even know what to do about this. I can't believe that one of these teams is going to make the playoffs. That's like the shame. That's the shame that one of these teams, either Philly or Dallas or the Giants or Washington, one of them is going to make the playoffs. And I just can't figure out how. I think they've got a combined 3 wins between all 4 of them. Just terrible. But McLaurin and Gibson both look like good starts this week. I do like them both this week. Good matchups there. Daniel Jones, a sit despite the great matchup. I mean, I just can't understand or figure out how he cratered last week against the Dallas defense. That just really shakes me to my core. It's too bad. I really like Daniel Jones coming into this year, and he has just regressed horrendously. And that is a risk with quarterbacks. You see it all the time where they come out and they make a splash as a rookie, and then they totally do a big regression in their second year. Look at like Baker Mayfield. That's just a recent example. But that's kind of the risk of taking second-year quarterbacks. You can either hit it big, you can either get yourself a Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson, or you could just totally whiff on this one. Daniel Jones, not good. Sit him despite the great matchup. I also think all the Giants receivers are sits this week. Washington is top 5 against receivers. So this is not a matchup you want to be involved in, and I would not start them. And then also, but on the flip side, I think Evan Ingram is a start. Washington is top 3 against opposing tight ends. So, 4 opposing tight ends. So it's a great matchup for Evan Ingram. I think he will be the most effective receiver on the team this week, and should be good for fantasy. He should give you a good fantasy line. So let's move on here. Who do we got next? Oh yes, the Falcons at the Vikings. Oh, this is a game that just seems like it's going to be a super high scoring fantasy treasure trove. You would hope. But the Falcons are just a mess right now. They fired their coach. Really, the only receiver I can trust is Calvin Ridley. Todd Gurley's doing great. So Gurley's absolutely a start. Ridley's a start. I don't think I can recommend starting Ryan. Certainly not Julio Jones. He is not well. Hopefully they just have him sit out this week. Just make him out. Just let him get better, man. It is such a disappointment what he's done this year. And if you're looking for a streamer, I got to say I really like Kirk Cousins in this matchup. Atlanta has given up the most points to fantasy quarterbacks this year. So that just points to me to being a great time to start someone like Kirk Cousins. And really, there's no bad matchups. If they're playing, they're all good matchups. Like Hayden Hurst is a guy that's very hard to trust, but I am actually going to start him this week in one of my leagues because, at least he's getting 5 or 6 targets, and he's kind of my best option for a tight end at this point. How is it that I have both Hayden Hurst and Tyler Higbee, and I don't want to start either of them? It's just one of those seasons, man. It's crazy. Okay, so next up, what do we got? We got Bengals at the Colts. Okay, so Colts for real. Their defense is for real. They are top 10 against the quarterback, against the running back, against the wide receiver, and against the tight end position. So you can't really start any Bengals this week. There's no Bengals that I could recommend starting against this Colts defense. It is a meat grinder, man. It's not a good matchup at all. So if you can sit them, sit them. Do not start them this week. But on the flip side, all the Colts look great. They all look like they have great matchup, but the only one that I would recommend sitting is Phil Rivers. He's just hasn't been great, and it just doesn't look like a good matchup. And so I would sit him, but everyone else that's active on Indy should be good. I really like them, so go with that. Then we got the Bears at the Panthers. This is a very interesting game, man. But it does look like a low-scoring game to me. And so that's going to make it tough for fantasy. Both these defenses have been doing pretty well. I'm actually very surprised at how well the Panthers defense has been looking. They are top 5 against quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. That's great. Now, the ones that you definitely want to start on both sides of the ball are the running backs. So David Montgomery for Chicago, Mike Davis for the Panthers. Both those guys, absolutely a start. But I got to tell you, man, if you can, you need to sit everybody else. I mean, Allen Robinson, right? You're never going to sit him, right? Play him. I think he'll be fine. But it's not a great matchup. It's a bad matchup. So, you just need to be prepared for disappointment there. But really, like I said, I think this is going to be a really low-scoring game. And last week, the Bears, when they played the Patriots, and the final score was 19-20, I'm like, wow, that's a totally normal football score. And somehow I was so disappointed at the results there. But I think that's what you're going to see here is something where if either team gets to 20, it's going to be, I don't think either team will hit 20 this week. But anyway, there you go for that game. Now, let's see here. Who do we have next? Oh, yeah. Oh, geez, man. Ugh, another stinker game. Jets at the Dolphins. How is it that Adam Gase still has a job? After they fired Dan Quinn and they fired Bill O'Brien, Gase is still there. And before the season started, I put the over-under for Gase getting fired at 6 games, and I took the under. And so obviously I'm not going to win. But I do think that the Jets are going to go 0-6, and I think they are finally going to fire Gase after this week. So even though I don't win my little bet against myself, the guillotine blade has to be sliding down the little track right now because it is just like the word. I mean, releasing Bell this week. It's just another head-scratching move on a bad team with no prospects. It's just a mess. Now, for the game, as far as the Jets go, the only players that I could recommend starting would be Jamison Crowder and Jeff Smith. I think both those guys are getting really good volume. It's going to be a negative game script. They're going to be passing the ball a ton. I know it's Joe Flacco, but the volume is there. They should be very productive. So I do like both those guys, but I don't like anybody else on the Jets. Don't bother with anyone else. And then as far as the Dolphins, man, this looks like a great matchup. Everyone's a start. I really like it. As far as a streaming option, if you need a streaming quarterback, Fitzmagic, man, go with Fitzmagic. He's had 2 great games in a row. He's doing really good this year. There doesn't appear to be any threat of Tua taking over this offense, and they're doing pretty good without having to start him. I think that's good. I think that portends well to next season when Tua will be the starter and Tua will be a priority pickup in your fantasy drafts next year. And another streaming option, if you're looking for a defense this week, the Miami defense, great streaming option. The Jets allow the most points to opposing defenses this season. Perfect. Start the Miami defense. I think it's going to be a great game for anybody in a Miami uniform. So go ahead, start them all. Who do we have next? Let's see here. Packers at the Buccaneers. So now the Buccaneers are a legitimate tough defense, all right? They're top 10 against quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. But I cannot tell you to sit Aaron Rodgers or Aaron Jones or Devontae Adams. I'm just not going to do it. I can't do it. You have to start them if you have them. They are not a sit, but just understand that this is a tough matchup. So just be prepared for that. But on the flip side, tell me you didn't enjoy watching Brady get beat by Nick Foles once again. I mean, just such a great thing. It was fun. But anyway, this week though, and I told you last week, I told you Brady was a sit. I told you it was a sucky matchup. So I hope you listen to me. I hope you bench Brady. But this week, I think Brady's good. So if you want to start him, go ahead and start him. And the only sits on the Bucs side that I can see here would be the tight ends, Gronkowski or Brate. Those guys would be marginal starters anyway at best. But it is a very tough matchup against the Packers defense is very good against tight ends. So they are top 6, in fact. So I wouldn't mess with that. And then finally, as far as a start, I love Ronald Jones this week. I think Jones is a great start, great matchup, should be very productive. I know that Leonard Fournette is coming back from injury. We'll see how much work he'll get, but I'm convinced that Ronald Jones is the best option in that backfield. He has the most trust. So I think he will be the primary guy. So moving on, we've got, now this is an interesting matchup. This next one, man, really does intrigue me. It's the Rams at the Niners, divisional game. But what the hell happened to the Niners last week? How did they get stomped? I mean, they got stomped on by Miami. Certainly, there was probably a little bit of looking ahead on the schedule, thinking Miami was not going to be a problem, and then Miami showed up ready to play. But I got to tell you, man, just getting walloped by the Dolphins. That's just crazy. Now, the Niners are a legitimately good defense, despite what you saw last week. They are top 10 against wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. So that means it's a cautious start for me for any of the Rams players on that side of the ball. Now, certainly right now, Higbee, I can't trust his volume. He would be a sit anyway, but I'm not going to sit Woods. I'm not going to sit Kupp, and I'm not going to well, you're taking a chance on which running back it's going to be. But Darrell Henderson, I would not sit him either. But just understand that it is a tough matchup. Now, the one position that I didn't mention there was Jared Goff, and I think Jared Goff is a great start this week, especially if if you're short because of the bye week, or if you have some of these poor matchups for quarterbacks that I've been talking about. I think Goff is a great option to start as well this week. So on the flip side, though, obviously the Rams defense is pretty darn good as well, and they are very tough against the quarterback. So Jimmy G, I would not start him this week. He is not a starter. As far as other positions, I think Mostert and Kittle are good this week. The matchup isn't overimposing. I think they should be productive. But anyway, it should be an interesting game. I'm interested to see what happens here. And people are still talking about the fact that that all four of the teams in the NFC West are going to make the playoffs this year, and I think it certainly is a possibility. But we'll get some real clarity here to see if last week was just a hiccup for the Niners, or if really the Niners are in trouble, which could certainly be a possibility, suffering from that post-Super Bowl hangover. Now, let's look at Monday Night Football. We got a doubleheader because of all the craziness that's been happening with the schedules. But the first game is going to be the Chiefs at the Bills. And, of course, the Bills got spanked last week by the Titans. So how are they going to respond to that? And this is another super tough matchup against a very effective offense. I got to say, the Bills' defense has been one of the bigger disappointments this year. They were one of my priority targets for if you wanted to take an elite defense. They were the one that I was like saying, oh, you should take them because they got a great schedule and they should be really good. And they have not been good. They have been terrible, and that's too bad. But as far as the Chiefs go, it starts across the board. Everyone's a go. Everyone's a start. Go ahead and start them up. Now, on the other side, the Chiefs' defense has been very effective against wide receivers. So I think outside of Stephon Diggs, you can't start any of the receivers on the Bills this next week. So stay away from that. I do think Josh Allen's going to have a nice bounce back week. And the backfield, the Buffalo's backfield, though, does look like a problem. I'm very concerned about Singletary. You got Zach Moss coming back from injury. We're not sure what the usage is going to be, but the potential for a negative game script here is very high. And if that's the case, they're going to just get away from the running game and they're going to go to the passing game. So that does not portend well to either Zach Moss or Devin Singletary. So I would definitely sit them this week. And finally, the final game of Monday Night Football, the doubleheader, the second game, is going to be the Cardinals at the Cowboys. And of course, the Cowboys have one of the historically worst defenses ever. They almost lost to the Giants last week, even after losing Dak Prescott. But, as far as the Cardinals go, man, everyone's a start. Go ahead. Start your Cardinals. It's going to be a big game for them. They're going to do very, very well. But on the flip side, the Cowboys, obviously you got the downgraded quarterback with being Andy Dalton. It's not a great matchup for Dalton. I did recommend him as a pickup. If he is your quarterback, you might have to go ahead and start him. And, again, it's a great offense. There's so many weapons around him. Andy Dalton has never had that much talent around him ever in his NFL career. So he's going to be productive, but it is going to be a very tough matchup. Also, Arizona is top 10 against they're top 5 against wide receivers. So the whole thing about Cooper and Lamb and Gallup, it's very cloudy this week. We don't know who's going to get the volume. You might be in a situation where you have to start one of these guys, though. And I think if that's the case, then, you got to start him just because of all the other bye weeks and players missing. But it could be a little bit dicey there. The point of attack that I think the Cowboys are going to have, it's going to be through the ground game. It's going to be Zeke Elliott. Zeke Elliott, I think, is in store for a very big game against this soft rush defense. So that's where I would be looking. Obviously, Zeke is always a start, but I think that's where most of the work is going to funnel through the running back, the running game, and the running back. So anyway, so there you go. So that is it for week 6. I hope your teams are doing good out there. I'm hoping this is helping you out. And, if you have any questions or concerns about any players not mentioned here, typically if I don't mention them as a sit, that means they're probably okay to start. Maybe it's not the best matchup, but it's still going to be a decent matchup. So, you're probably good to go. But if you got any questions about any of these players or any other players, please leave me a message down below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I do appreciate that. And thank you very much for watching. So good luck in week 6. Let's hope there's no last-second cancellations. Man, that really threw me for a loop on Sunday morning when they were like, okay, the Broncos-New England game isn't happening. And I had a bunch of players from New England set to start, so I had to do this shuffling to get them out. And of course, there was in one of my leagues, I had the Green Bay kicker, so Green Bay was on bye already, and I had picked up, I think it's Nick Folk is the kicker for the Patriots, and so I had 2 kickers that were all of a sudden on bye, and the waiver wire was locked, so I couldn't pick up another one, so I had to go with a 0 on the kicker position last week, which is a total bummer. But expect that to happen. Expect the unexpected, and just be sure you have the proper amount of depth on your bench. And Sunday morning, man, watch before the games start. Man, get on there. Watch like the fantasy football. I usually watch the ESPN's fantasy football on ESPN2. Because they usually have the good information there about who's inactive and if there's any COVID outbreaks that would cause a game to be canceled. So just be sure to absolutely do that this year. More than ever, man. It's more important than ever just because of the craziness of this season and the craziness of COVID. So thank you very much for watching. And like I said, I'll be back again next week with Swami, and we'll be talking there. I do want to let you all know that I did win a game in our 94 Rock Listener League, finally. And, so now I'm going to start moving up the board. And I think I already moved up like 3 spots this week because my team has scored so many points. It's just my record stinks. So as long as I can notch a few more wins, I'm going to very rapidly move up the board, just because I've scored more points than most everybody else in this league. So anyway, there we go. So thank you very much for watching again. Have yourself a great fantasy week. Good luck in week 6, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a good one, everybody.